Commander Zethra stood in front of the Luminous Accords observation deck. She had her three-fingered hands clasped behind her back and was looking at the blue and green sphere slowly spinning in space. The Earth. What a simple name for such a confusing world. The ship had been circling this planet for 73 cycles, doing what should have been a normal biological survey. The Caltharian Empire had mapped out thousands of worlds in 17 galaxies. They had written down all the different kinds of life, from crystalline beings made of silicon that lived in radiation storms to colonies that breathed methane and thrived in atmospheres below freezing. But nothing, not a single thing in their huge archives, had prepared them for what they were seeing on this unremarkable planet in a long-forgotten spiral arm of the Milky Way. Commander, the atmospheric readings still don't match up with the biological activity we're seeing, Science Officer Livin said, his bioluminescent skin flickering amber with confusion. The changes in temperature alone should require at least 3 different species to adapt, but the genetic markers show that there is only one dominant species in all of the monitored areas. Zethra's main eyes narrowed, and her secondary pair scanned the data that was streaming across the holographic display in great detail. The numbers didn't make sense. Not at all possible. Show me the monitoring of the desert zone again, she said. The screen changed to show infrared images of a huge area of sand dunes where the surface temperature was higher than 52 degrees Celsius. Every biological model that the Caltharians had said that complex life shouldn't be able to live here without a lot of technology or special evolutionary changes like reflective exoskeletons or internal cooling systems. But there they were. People. Walking across the hot sand with nothing but cloth wrapped around their bodies and simple water containers. Their core temperatures stayed the same. Their cells didn't show any signs of crystallization or breaking down from heat. They just walked. Like the hellish heat was just a bother. How? Zethra whispered, mostly to herself. Our own people would need full environmental suits with 6 backup cooling systems to stay alive for 15 minutes in those conditions. They are crossing it with technology that is less advanced than what we had 10,000 years ago. Livin opened up another display. It gets worse, Commander. Or maybe it's more interesting, depending on how you look at it. Look at the areas where people live at high altitudes. The picture showed groups of simple buildings on the sides of mountains where the air pressure was only 60% of what it is at sea level. The amount of oxygen would make any Caltharian's breathing stop right away, even with help. Livin went on, his voice a mix of admiration and disbelief. These people have lived in these settlements for generations. Somehow, their bodies have changed the chemistry of their blood so that it can get oxygen more easily. Their lungs have gotten bigger. They've changed. Without technology. Not using genetic engineering. It's just a natural biological change that happens over a few hundred rotations of their planet. Zethra felt a chill run through her exoskeleton, which she hadn't felt since she was a child. The Caltharian Empire was proud to be the most advanced civilization in terms of evolution. They had conquered the stars with their superior intelligence and engineering. They had long since moved past the messy chaos of natural adaptation and instead chose the accuracy of technological improvement and controlled genetic modification. But what they were seeing made them question everything they thought they knew about what was biologically possible. Show me the ocean data, Zethra said in a low voice. The display changed again, and this time even the veteran commander couldn't hide how he felt. The video showed a person going down into the ocean without any help from a breathing device or pressure suit. If a Caltharian were to go this deep, the water pressure would crush them into a dense cube of biological matter in seconds. But this person just held their breath and dove deeper. And deeper. The human glided through the water with a grace that seemed almost mocking. They were more than 11 times stronger than their species could handle, and they were more than 100 meters below the surface. His heart rate had dropped a lot. His oxygen use had dropped to levels that should mean death, but he was clearly alive, aware, and able to do things. When he finally came back up after almost 4 minutes, he just smiled and breathed normally. Medical specialist Kren, who had been getting more and more upset as he looked at the biological data, said, "That shouldn't be possible. The difference in pressure alone should cause organs to fail right away. The lack of oxygen should cause the brain to die. If the water were this cold, it would make our bodies go into hypothermia in less than a minute. But this animal acts like it's a fun thing to do." Zethra turned away from the display, her mind having a hard time processing what she had seen over the last 73 cycles. The Caltharian Empire had made environmental suits that could keep them safe in very bad weather, but those suits were the result of thousands of years of scientific progress. They needed power sources, backup systems, and regular upkeep. These people did the same thing with just the bodies they were born with. Zethra said, I want a full look at their evolutionary history. There must be something about their development that makes them so adaptable. Life doesn't just happen to be able to live in places like volcanic regions and Arctic wastelands. We must be missing something, some kind of mechanism. Zethra looked back down at the planet as her crew rushed to follow her orders. She had never felt anything like this before in her long career as a survey commander. It wasn't really fear, but it was probably the closest thing to it that a Keltharian could feel. Not sure. They thought that biological evolution had limits and that real progress required going beyond the randomness of natural selection through planned technological and genetic intervention. They thought that species that stayed pure biological entities were primitive because their unmodified genetics limited their abilities. But what if they were wrong? What if there was something deep and powerful in the messy, chaotic process of natural adaptation that their controlled method had missed? On a basic level, the thought was disturbing. It called into question the very basis of Keltharian civilization. "Commander," Livin said, breaking into her thoughts. "We've found another problem. People have been seen in an area where the temperature drops to -40 degrees at night. They have built simple shelters, but our scans show that their metabolisms have changed to produce a lot more internal heat. They're living through conditions that would freeze our blood and other fluids." Zethra closed her 4 eyes and took a deep breath. She had made a choice when she opened them again. Start close-range observation protocols. I want teams to keep an eye on people living in every harsh environment on Earth. People who live in deserts, mountains, the deep sea, and the Arctic, and everything else. We need to figure out what secret biological elasticity we might have that we haven't noticed yet. Livin asked, "Should we make plans for first contact?" Zethra said, "Not yet. These people don't even know we're watching them. We shouldn't make things harder until we know what we're dealing with. I have a feeling that showing ourselves too soon to a species that can change so easily might not be good for us." She didn't say what was really bothering her, the thing that kept her up at night. What if humans could adapt to more than just extreme weather? What if this same biological adaptability applied to other obstacles? Rivalry? Is there a problem? How to stay alive in dangerous situations? The Keltharian Empire had depended on having better technology for so long that they had become experts in it. They were great in their controlled environments but weak outside of them. On the other hand, humans seemed to be nature's best generalists, able to live anywhere and adapt to anything. In the big game of cosmic survival, Zethra was starting to think that her people might have been following the wrong rules all along. There was a lot going on at the research station on the Luminous Accord. Teams of Keltharian scientists were busy analyzing the data that was coming in from observation drones all over Earth's surface. What started as a normal biological cataloging had turned into the Empire's most in-depth study in hundreds of years. From the central hub, Science Officer Livin oversaw the main research effort. His skin changed colors as he dealt with the huge amount of information. Holographic displays in front of him showed feeds from 7 different extreme environments at the same time. Each one seemed impossible for biological life to survive without help. He told the research team that they should start with the baseline impossibilities. Sector 7, the settlements at high altitudes. The display was mostly about a mountain range that people called the Himalayas. A village clung to the steep slopes, which were almost 5,000 meters above sea level. The air pressure here was about half of what it is at sea level, and there wasn't enough oxygen to breathe safely. "Meet the Sherpa people," Livin said, zooming in on a middle-aged man carrying what looked like a huge load of supplies up a narrow mountain path. "We've figured out that this person's name is Tenzing. They are carrying about 60 kilograms of gear up a 4 to 5 degree slope at an altitude that would make most animals pass out." The researchers watched in silence as Tenzing slowly climbed higher and higher, his breathing steady and controlled. There were also comparative data next to the footage that showed what would happen to a Keltharian in the same place. Medical specialist Kren said, "Our species would have immediate breathing problems. We would pass out in less than 5 minutes. Permanent brain damage in 15 minutes. 30 minutes later, death. We can only keep our portable oxygen systems working at this height for short periods of time before the stress builds up and becomes dangerous." "But Tenzing and his people have lived their whole lives at this height," Livin said. "Not only are they surviving, they're doing well. They are stronger than the humans from the lowlands who try to come here. Their bodies have gotten better at using oxygen at the cellular level, making their lungs bigger, and making more red blood cells. Evolution has changed what should be a deadly environment into their natural home." Vorin, another researcher, got more data. "What's really interesting is how quickly things change. We have followed lowland humans who go to these heights. Their bodies start making genetic expressions that help them carry more oxygen within weeks. It's not a permanent change to the genes, it's a system that can turn on and off based on what the environment needs. Impossible flexibility, Zethra said quietly from where she was watching. Keep going with the people in the desert. The display changed to show the Australian outback, where daytime temperatures were over 50 degrees Celsius and nighttime temperatures dropped to near freezing. A group of native people moved easily across the land, using their knowledge of the terrain to find food and water where the Caltharian sensors only found empty space. The change in temperature alone should be deadly, Kren said. A 40-degree temperature change in a day would cause our regulatory systems to fail completely. But look. The video showed an old Aboriginal woman named Mary sitting quietly in the shade during the hottest part of the day. Thermal imaging showed how well her body was able to control its temperature. Her blood flow to her extremities had changed to keep her from getting too hot. Her sweat glands were working perfectly, making an evaporative cooling system that worked with perfect accuracy. At night, the same system worked in the opposite way, tightening blood vessels to keep the core temperature stable. No technology, live unstressed. No suits for the environment. There are no climate control systems. Just biological systems that change on their own to meet the needs of the environment. We've tried to make our own environmental suits as flexible as this one, but even with cutting-edge nanotechnology and AI-controlled systems, we can't match how well and quickly humans can regulate their body temperature. Vorin put more information on the screen. We've also written down information about people who live in the Sahara Desert and can survive on very little water, which would kill other species. Their kidneys have changed to hold on to as much water as possible. Their metabolism has changed to keep them from losing too much water. Some people can live normally on less than 2 liters of water a day, while we would need 10 times that amount to not get dehydrated. Now the really scary data, Zethra said. Let them see the ocean observations. The holographic display changed to show video of a human freediver named James getting ready for a deep dive. The researchers had been watching him for weeks, and it seemed like every dive broke more biological rules than the last. James took a lot of deep breaths, breathing too fast to get enough oxygen into his blood. Then, with one strong kick, he started to fall into the blue depths. Pay attention to the physiological changes, Kren said, pointing out different biological markers on the screen. As James went down, his heart rate dropped from 70 beats per minute to only 30. His spleen shrank, releasing red blood cells that had been stored there into his bloodstream to carry more oxygen. Blood flow to his arms and legs slowed down, putting vital organs first. His body was basically going into a state that was like hibernation, but he was still fully awake and able to do things. Down 50 meters. 70 meters. 100 meters. The pressure was too much at this depth. More than 11 atmospheres of force pushing on his body from all sides. The tools used by the Caltharian research team showed stress levels that should have caused organs to break and death right away. But James kept diving deeper, moving slowly and steadily. He reached his target depth of 114 meters, picked up a marker that another diver had left there, and started to climb. Kren said, the pressure at that depth is about 114 newtons per square centimeter. His voice was tight with disbelief. Our bodies would be squished into a mass that was about 1/3 the size of our normal volume. Our exoskeletons would break. Our organs would fall apart. Death would happen right away and without a doubt. And yet he's smiling, Vorin said, pointing to James's face as he came up from a dive that lasted 3 minutes and 42 seconds. The person took a few deep breaths, and within seconds, their vital signs were back to normal. He laughed, waved at other divers, and got ready to go down again. How many dives has he done today? Zethra asked. 7, Livin said. Each one going deeper than what our biology books say is possible. And he's not even thought of as a great free diver among people. Some people go over 130 meters all the time. Some have gone down to depths of almost 150 meters in one breath. The researchers sat in stunned silence as James dove again, and his body automatically set off the same chain of adaptive responses. Lower heart rate. Limiting blood flow to the periphery. Contraction of the spleen. A diving reflex in mammals that seemed too advanced for a species that had only been seriously exploring the ocean depths for a few generations. We need to talk about the people in the Arctic, Vorin said as he pulled up new video. The display showed a group of Inuit people living in northern Alaska, where the temperature often dropped to -40 degrees Celsius in the winter. The people had built insulated shelters out of ice and animal skins, but even these simple buildings shouldn't be enough to keep them safe from such extreme cold. But the Inuit not only lived, they thrived. The video showed kids playing in the snow, adults hunting across frozen landscapes, and whole communities going about their normal lives in conditions that would kill a Caltharian in an hour. Kren said, their basal metabolic rate goes up in the winter. They make more internal heat through cellular processes. Their peripheral blood vessels have changed so that they can keep blood flowing to the ends of their limbs even in very cold weather, which keeps them from getting frostbite while still protecting their core temperature. Their body fat distribution has changed to give them the best insulation without getting in the way of movement. Livin went on to say, we've tried to make environmental suits that would let our people work in the same conditions. The suits need fusion power cores, 3 backup heating systems, and constant monitoring of hundreds of environmental variables. They still don't work at temperatures below -30 degrees. These people do the same thing with only the clothes they weave from animal hair. Zethra stood up and walked over to the displays, looking at each one in turn. The deserts. The hills. The deep ocean. The Arctic that is frozen. Each one was a different environment that would require her people to have different specialized equipment to survive, but people seemed to move between them with ease. Get the genetic analysis up, she said. A new screen showed the human genome next to the Caltharian genetic structure. The differences were clear and worrisome. Kren said, we have improved our genome through thousands of years of controlled breeding and genetic engineering. We've gotten rid of genetic redundancy, made our biological processes work better in the environment we want, and gotten rid of the randomness that comes with natural evolution. We're good at what we do and work quickly. He talked about the human genome. Humans, on the other hand, are a genetic mess. There are extra systems all over the place. Genes that are dormant but turn on when certain environmental stresses are present. Regulatory mechanisms that enable swift alterations in gene expression without enduring genetic modification. They're not made to work best in any one place. They are made to work in a wide range of situations. Which makes them better, Zethra said softly. The room was quiet. It was the first time anyone had said what they were all thinking. In terms of raw adaptability, yes, Kren said. We've given up flexibility in favor of efficiency. They've kept their flexibility, but they've lost their ability to specialize. In their changing environment, their method has worked very well. Livin opened a simulation that compared things. We used our current biology and technology to run models of how the Caltharians would colonize Earth. Result, we would need permanent environmental suits for 87% of the Earth's surface area. We could only set up long-lasting colonies in a few places where the climate was controlled. Even then, any failure of the equipment would be a disaster. He changed the simulation to show how people spread out. Humans, on the other hand, have lived on every continent and in every climate zone, from the equatorial rainforests to the polar ice caps. They've done it without our technology or scientific knowledge, using only their incredibly flexible biology and their stubborn refusal to accept the limits of the environment. Zethra looked at the data, and her mind was fighting with the uncomfortable ideas that came to mind. The Caltharian Empire built their civilization over thousands of years on the idea that biological evolution was slow and inefficient, and that true progress needed to go beyond natural selection through technology and controlled genetics. But what if they were wrong? What if they had optimized themselves into a corner, becoming so specialized that they lost the very quality that made humans so powerful, the ability to adapt, change, and thrive in chaos instead of just surviving in perfect order? Give me psychological profiles, Zethra said. If their bodies can change so easily, what about their minds? Are they just as open-minded, adaptable, and good at solving problems? Vorin said, already compiled, as he pulled up new data. And Commander, you're not going to like what you see. Zethra's skin turned a deep purple of worry because of the way he said it. If people could change their minds as easily as they could change their bodies, the Caltharian Empire might be facing something much bigger than just an interesting biological oddity. They could be up against someone who is better at evolution than they are. The conference room on the Luminous Accord was full of the Empire's best scientists. Commander Zethra had called in experts from all over the fleet and even asked for specialists to be sent from the nearest Caltharian colony world. They needed the best analysis their civilization could give for what they were studying. Dr. Marin, the Empire's top evolutionary biologist, stood in the middle of the room. Her body, which was over 600 years old, was heavy with the weight of all the scientific research she had done. She had looked at thousands of species in dozens of galaxies, but the look on her weathered face made it clear that this was something new to her. Let me be very clear, she started, her voice full of authority from her years of experience. What we're seeing in human biology isn't just survival. Survival is a passive, reactive process. Humans show active, dynamic adaptation. They don't just put up with harsh conditions. They do well in them. Their bodies don't just deal with stress. They get stronger in response to it. She turned on a holographic display that showed a cellular-level analysis of human muscle tissue. Watch. When people put stress on their muscles by working out, the tissue doesn't just fix itself. It gets stronger as it heals. They hurt themselves on purpose and come out stronger. This is called hypertrophy, and it's a perfect example of their whole biological philosophy. Medical expert Kren stepped up to share what he had found. We've seen this adaptation response happen in a lot of different systems. When bones are put under stress, their density goes up. Aerobic exercise that lasts a long time makes the heart work better. Even their brain works better when they face mental challenges. They have a biological feedback loop that sees problems as chances to get better instead of things to stay away from. Dr. Marin went on to show Keltharian cellular structures next to human samples and said, "This is similar to our own biology. Our tissues are very well designed for stability and efficiency. We don't have the same ability to adapt because we evolved in an environment that was very stable and then used genetic engineering to make that stability even better. We made things better for the way we like them to be." She focused on the cells in the body. Humans evolved on a planet that was very chaotic and had conditions that changed a lot. The ice ages. Times of volcanoes. Big changes in the weather. Their biology evolved a strategy of adaptability rather than specialization. Every system has some extra parts and the ability to change. It's not very efficient by our standards, but it's very strong. The next set of data was given by Science Officer Livin. Let's look at some specific ways that things adapt. First, thermoregulation. There was a detailed diagram of how the human body controls its temperature. Humans keep their core body temperature at about 37 degrees Celsius by using an incredibly complicated system of feedback loops. When the temperature outside goes up, they use a number of cooling methods at the same time. Vasodilation makes blood flow to the surface of the skin, which releases heat. Using evaporative cooling, sweat glands turn on. Behavioral changes happen, like looking for shade or doing less. He went on to say, the system goes back to normal when the outside temperature drops. Vasoconstriction makes it harder for heat to escape through the skin. Thermogenesis is the process by which the body generates more internal heat by raising its metabolic rate. Shivering is when your muscles contract without you wanting them to, which makes heat quickly. They even have a special kind of fat called brown adipose tissue that burns calories just to keep them warm. Dr. Marin spoke up, and here's the most amazing thing. These aren't just automatic reactions. You can train and improve them. People who are regularly exposed to heat become better at sweating, can handle hotter temperatures, and turn on their cooling responses faster. People who are often cold have better thermogenesis, more brown fat, and better blood flow to their hands and feet. Their bodies learn from what happens to them and get better at responding. Vorin showed data that could be compared. We tried to make our environmental suits just as flexible as this. We can't match the speed and accuracy of human thermoregulation, even with advanced AI systems that watch hundreds of variables and make thousands of changes every minute. Their biological system works on its own, doesn't need an outside power source, and changes its baseline performance based on long-term changes in the environment. It's beautiful in a way that our technology isn't. The conversation turned to another amazing thing that people can do, adapt to different altitudes. Kren said, the Sherpa people we've been watching are a great example. People who have lived at high altitudes for generations have developed genetic changes that make oxygen work better. More room in the lungs. Hemoglobin that works better. More capillaries in muscles. These aren't just temporary changes, they've been passed down through generations through natural selection over the course of a few thousand years. But even more impressive, Dr. Marin said, is the temporary adaptation we see in lowland humans who travel to high places. Their bodies start making more red blood cells within a few days. Their ability to use oxygen gets much better in just a few weeks. This is called acclimatization, and it shows that the human body can make big changes to its physiology without changing its genes. She looked up information that compared how well humans and Keltharians can handle high altitudes. Above 3,000 meters, our species needs extra oxygen. We can't safely work above 5,000 meters for long periods of time, even with help. People can live at heights higher than 5,000 meters and work at heights higher than 8,000 meters, but it is hard for them to do so. Some people have climbed to peaks higher than 8,500 meters without extra oxygen. They survived in places where the air is so thin that our people would die in minutes. The presentation went on to talk about the diving reflex, which is one of the most confusing adaptations in humans. Kren's skin was flickering with colors of amazement as he said, "This is where human biology becomes almost magical. When a person puts their face in water, especially cold water, their body automatically reacts. The heart rate goes down by 20 to 30%. Blood flow shifts from the limbs to the important organs. The spleen shrinks, letting out red blood cells that it has stored. They basically go into a state of suspension that lets them hold their breath for a long time." He played the video of James's record dive again. At depth, more changes happen. Without harm, their lungs shrink to a small fraction of their normal size. Blood plasma moves into lung tissue to keep it from collapsing. Breath holding reduces nitrogen absorption, which prevents decompression sickness that would kill other species. This all happens on its own, without any conscious thought or help from technology. Dr. Marin brought up the most troubling information so far. We've been trying to give our own biology similar adaptive abilities through genetic modification for the past 30 cycles. The results have been, not good. The screen showed a series of experiments that didn't work. Caltharian test subjects who were given better temperature tolerance became weak in their normal environment. People who were changed to adapt to high altitudes had heart problems at sea level. Every time we tried to make biological systems more flexible, they became less stable at their baseline level. Dr. Marin said softly, "We're learning a hard truth. We optimized our species into a corner. We're perfectly suited to the conditions we like, but we're weak outside of them. Humans kept a lot of flexibility, but they lost some efficiency in the process. In their changing world, their way of doing things worked better. In the bigger picture of surviving in space, their biological strategy might work better than ours." After a while, Commander Zethra, who had been quiet, spoke up. "What about being able to adapt mentally? What about their minds if their bodies are this flexible?" Dr. Marin's face showed even more worry. "That's when things get really scary. We looked at how people react to problems in their minds, and we found the same pattern of adaptive enhancement that we see in their bodies." She showed data on how people react to stress. When people have mental problems, they don't just deal with them. They become more resilient. If you deal with trauma in the right way, it can lead to what they call post-traumatic growth. Being in stressful situations over and over again, in controlled settings, helps you handle stress better and deal with crises better. Their brains are as flexible as their bodies, they are always changing based on what they learn. Livin added information about culture. We've looked into their past. People have survived disasters that would have wiped out most civilizations. Plagues that took a lot of their people. Wars that destroyed whole areas. Natural disasters that ruined their cities. And every time, they rebuild, change, and often come out stronger. They've come up with psychological frameworks that are specifically designed to turn problems into chances. Vorin said, "Their education systems are meant to be hard on their kids. They give them problems that get harder over time, which helps them learn how to solve problems by putting them under stress. They value something they call resilience, which is the ability to deal with setbacks and keep going. They have stories in their culture that praise people who beat impossible odds." Dr. Marin ended the presentation in a way that made people feel uneasy. In short, humans have a level of biopsychological plasticity that we can't copy with technology or genetic engineering. We used to think that being a specialist was better, but they are generalists in a universe where that is not the case. They are flexible, while we are more rigid. We are efficient, but they are strong. She stopped for a moment to let the meaning of what she had said sink in for the scientists who were there. If we had to compete with humans for resources, land, or survival, our technological advantages might not be enough. We need our technology to work in different places, but they just change. And they do it faster, better, and more creatively than our controlled, planned systems let them. The room went quiet. The question was in the air, but no one said it out loud. Everyone knew what it meant. Did the Caltharian Empire accidentally make themselves useless by trying to make technology perfect and improve their genes? Zethra stood up, and the holographic data that was still moving around the room was reflected in her 4 eyes. "We've based our whole society on the idea that evolution without direction is wasteful and that natural selection is less effective than planned design. These people are making us question everything we think we know about how biology changes over time." She looked at Dr. Marin. "Is there any way we can get this flexibility back? Can we put flexibility back into our DNA?" The old scientist's silence was enough of an answer. "I didn't think so," Zethra said. "We've made ourselves the best we can be, but now we're stuck. We know how to make our perfect environment work, but we can't adapt when things change. We're so specialized that we're weak. She looked down at the planet spinning below them, full of billions of people who could change to fit any situation and didn't even know they were being watched. Keep watching everything, she said. I want to know everything about how they keep this flexibility, how their cultures help it, how their minds make it stronger, how their bodies do things that our best technology can't. The scientists left to do more research, but Zethra stayed behind and looked at Earth. She felt something for a less technologically advanced species for the first time in her long career that she had never expected to feel. Jealousy. Zethra had been using the observation deck as a safe place for the past 120 cycles. During breaks, she found herself drawn here, watching the planet below with a mix of interest and growing unease. Earth was no longer just a subject of study. It had turned into a mirror that showed her civilization's uncomfortable truths. Her senior staff came to see her today. The information they had gathered was complete, too much, and very disturbing. It was time to deal with the consequences. Let me make sure I understand correctly, Zethra said to the officers who were there. We've now recorded people living successfully in every major environmental extreme on their planet. Heat in the desert. Cold in the Arctic. High up in the air. Very deep ocean. Even in volcanic areas where the heat and poisonous gases should kill you right away. That's right, Livin said. We've also written down how quickly people adapt to new places. People from temperate zones can live in extreme conditions that their ancestors never had to deal with, as long as they are ready and used to them. Genetics isn't the only way they get their ability to adapt. It's a biological response system that works in real time. Kren went on to say, we've also found something even more amazing. People actively look for these harsh places. Not for survival, but for a personal challenge. They have a whole category of fun things to do that are all about pushing their bodies to the limit. Climbing mountains. Diving in the deep sea. Marathons in the desert. They choose to put themselves in situations that would scare our people. Why? Why? Zethra asked. What possible evolutionary benefit comes from actively looking for danger? Dr. Marin, who had spent a lot of time studying human psychology, answered. It's not about getting an immediate advantage for survival. It's about keeping and improving their ability to adapt. They keep their biological plasticity sharp by pushing themselves to do new things all the time. They have developed a belief in what they call the human spirit, which is almost like a religion that says they can overcome any problem if they are determined and adaptable. She showed a video of a person climbing a steep rock face without any safety gear. Sarah, a young woman who was climbing, held on to small holds on a vertical cliff. Her muscles shook with effort as she reached for the next handhold. She was very focused, not scared, even though one slip could kill her. Marin said, this is called free solo climbing. It doesn't do anything useful. It doesn't help in any way. But thousands of people do this because it's dangerous and requires complete mental and physical control. They're literally putting their lives on the line to show themselves that they can get over their fears and limits. Vorin brought up more examples. Running long distances in very hot weather. Swimming in the freezing waters of Antarctica. Climbing mountains in the death zone, where there isn't enough oxygen for the body to survive. People call these kinds of activities extreme sports, and they are celebrated in many cultures as ways to show what they think is the basic nature of humanity. Zethra said, the refusal to accept limits. That's right, Dr. Marin said. Humans have a cultural story that praises going beyond limits. Their stories, myths, and entertainment all focus on people who beat the odds. People say, that's impossible, which is not a fact but a challenge to prove otherwise. She showed data from the past. We've looked at how their technology has changed. Someone who didn't believe something couldn't be done made every big step forward. Flight with power. Traveling through space. Dividing the atom. Mapping their own DNA. Before each achievement, many experts said it was impossible, but people who didn't believe that limitation made it happen. Livin brought up psychological profiles that are similar. This is where the differences between our two species are most clear. Keltharian culture values stability, efficiency, and following the rules that are already in place. Instead of making big changes, we improve what already exists. Our progress is steady, methodical, and under control. He compared it to how people think. People are engines of chaos. They are motivated by curiosity, competition, and an almost obsessive desire to explore and conquer. When we see a stable system, we think, good, keep it that way. When they see a stable system, they think, how can we take this further? Their whole way of thinking is focused on change and challenge. Dr. Marin said, this isn't just about individual psychology. It's built into their social structures. They honor people who go against the rules. People they admire most from the past are often those who went against what was normal. They have a whole scientific method that is based on questioning what we think we know and pushing our limits. Zethra's skin turned a deep purple, which is a color that means deep distress among Caltharians. You are talking about a species that is fundamentally at odds with the values of our own civilization. Control, predictability, and optimization are at the heart of our culture. They built theirs on chaos, unpredictability, and constant disruption. Yes, Dr. Marin said without going into detail. And in terms of pure adaptability and ability to survive, their method may be better. The statement felt like it was there in the air. Finally, Tactical Officer Grant, who hadn't said anything until now, spoke up. We need to talk about the obvious question. Is the Empire in danger from people? Everyone looked at Zethra. She had been avoiding the question, but now she couldn't avoid it any longer. Let's think about this in a logical way, she said as she moved to the tactical display. Right now, people are very technologically backward. They just recently learned how to fly in space. They haven't even set up permanent colonies on their own moon. In terms of technology, we are far better than anyone else. But, she went on, let's look ahead. Their rate of technological progress is growing at an exponential rate. In less than 70 years, they went from flying with engines to landing on their moon. That's a huge step forward for a species that, in cosmic terms, has only recently built a civilization. Grant pulled up models that could predict the future. If their current rate of progress keeps going, they could be able to travel between stars in 200 to 300 years. That's way too fast. It took us 2,000 years to make that same jump. And they'll do it while keeping their biological advantages, Livin said. When they start colonizing other worlds, they won't need to change the environment as much as we did. They'll just get used to whatever situation they find. They could move across the galaxy much more quickly than we could. Vorin had another worry. We've also looked at how they feel about other species in terms of their culture. They don't have many examples because they haven't met any aliens yet, but their science fiction and made-up stories give us some worrying ideas. A lot of their stories are about humans either beating aliens or teaming up with them, but they always do so from a place of power or equality. They don't think of themselves as the weaker side. Dr. Marin said, that's because their whole way of thinking is based on beating stronger opponents. In their past, there are many stories of smaller, weaker groups beating bigger, stronger enemies by being flexible and determined. David beat Goliath. Tactics for guerrilla warfare. Wins for the underdog. These stories affect the way they all think. Zethra took in all of this information and felt the heavy burden of command on her shoulders. So we have a species that is better at adapting than we are, is always looking for new challenges and ways to grow, is making technological progress at an unprecedented rate, and is culturally programmed to think they can overcome any obstacle. Is that a good summary? Dr. Marin said, yes. There's one more thing to think about. They don't know about us yet. They don't know that someone is watching them. But when they finally figure out how to travel between stars and meet other species, they will quickly learn that their ability to adapt biologically gives them a big edge. Whether they become our enemies, friends, or conquerors will depend on how they use that advantage. Grant spoke with care. The Empire has rules for how to deal with species that might be dangerous. Containment ahead of time. Suppression of technology. In the worst cases, quarantine or death. Should we think about these choices? The room went quiet. It was the most serious question, the one that turned a mission to observe into something much more serious. Zethra turned away from the display, her mind racing with ideas and scenarios. The Caltharian Empire had lasted for thousands of years because they were careful about how they dealt with threats. They had never been afraid to do what was necessary to protect their way of life. But this time, things seemed different. People weren't the only threat. They were a big surprise. They stood for something the Empire had lost, or maybe never really had. The raw, wild ability to change and grow. No, Zethra finally said. We're not thinking about those choices. Not yet. She looked back at her officers. Because there is another option that we haven't talked about yet. What if we saw people as an opportunity instead of a threat? What if their ability to adapt biologically isn't just a threat to our superiority, but also a possible way to get us out of our evolutionary rut? Dr. Marin's eyes got bigger. You want to work together? Alliance. Zethra said, I think we need to think outside of our normal boxes. During this whole mission, we've been amazed and scared by what humans can do. But we haven't really thought about what we could learn from them. Or what we could do together. Livin seemed doubtful. The differences in culture are very deep. We like things to be stable, they like things to be chaotic. We like to be in charge, but they like to be free. How could these two very different civilizations work together? I don't know, Zethra said. But I do know this, our civilization is stuck. We've gotten our technology and genetics so good that we've stopped really changing. We are the best at what we do, but we can't leave it. People are crazy and hard to predict, but they still have something we don't. The ability to make big changes. She looked at each of her officers one by one. Keep making all of your observations. Write down everything. But I want a new analysis. I want to know not only how people adapt, but also how they choose what to adapt to. How they pick their problems. How they keep their desire to grow and change. Because, she said, if we want to stay alive as a species for the next million years, we might need to relearn something our ancestors knew but we've forgotten. That evolution isn't just about making things better for the present. It's about being able to change when things change. Grant still looked worried. And what if humans are hostile when we finally get in touch? Zethra's skin turned a determined shade of blue. Then we'll take care of that when it happens. But I won't kill a species just because they make us feel bad about ourselves. It would mean admitting that our so-called rationality is just a cover for fear. Zethra went back to the observation window after the meeting was over. The Earth spun below, a beautiful and chaotic mix of blue and green. Billions of people were living their lives down there, completely unaware that they had caused an existential crisis in one of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. She put her hand on the clear barrier and felt the cold of space beyond. People would be able to stay alive in that cold with only basic suits. They would dive into the ocean's crushing depths. They would climb mountains that seemed impossible. They would push themselves to the point where they could kill her people, and they would do it with joy and determination. Humanity, fuck yeah, she said in a human way she had learned from watching their conversations. It was rude and crude, but it got to the heart of what it means to be human. A confidence that is almost ridiculous in their ability to get through anything. Zethra thought for the first time in her life that maybe, just maybe, the universe needed some of that chaos. A little bit of that beautiful, unreasonable, and illogical human stubbornness. The Caltharian Empire had taken over the universe by using logic and control. But they had also stopped growing, changing, and really living. People, who are messy, weak, and can't change, might be just what the galaxy needs. Even though that thought scared her. It had been 300 cycles since the luminous accord first came to Earth's orbit. What started as a normal biological survey had turned into the biggest study the Caltharian Empire had ever done. But just watching wasn't enough anymore. Commander Zethra had made a choice that would either prove her theory or end her career. She was going to try testing the environment directly. With people who want to help. The challenge was huge. People didn't know that aliens were real. First contact rules were very strict and hard to follow. Zethra, on the other hand, had found a way around the rules. For scientific purposes, limited interaction was allowed if people were alone, not connected to their normal lives, and could be brought back with only a little memory of the encounter. After months of careful watching, Dr. Marin had found the perfect people for the job. 5 people were competing in what they called the Extreme Adventure Race, in a remote part of Patagonia. The Caltharian team had their chance when their group got separated from the main competition and couldn't talk to each other. Now, those 5 people were in a special observation chamber on the luminous accord, staring in shock at the first time they had seen alien life. Please stay calm, Dr. Marin said through the translation device. She carefully modulated her voice so that it didn't sound threatening. You are not in danger. We are scientists studying your amazing species, and we need your help to learn more about some of its biological abilities. The 5 people all acted in different ways. Marcus, a 32-year-old former soldier, quickly moved in front of the others to protect them. Even though he didn't have any weapons, his body was tense and ready. Elena, a marine biologist who is 28 years old, looked at the Caltharians with obvious interest. It seemed that her scientific curiosity was stronger than her fear. Tom and Rachel, a married couple in their 30s who were experts at climbing mountains, held hands but didn't move. Young Jake, who was only 21 and an amateur freerunner, looked like he was going to pass out or burst with excitement. You're really aliens, Jake said in a low voice. This is real. This is really happening. Yes, Dr. Marin said. We are the Caltharians. We have been watching your planet for a while, and we are especially impressed with the unique biological abilities of your species. Marcus's eyes got smaller. What do you want from us? To understand you, Zethra said as she stepped forward. We want to do a series of voluntary tests on your species to learn more about its adaptive abilities, which go against what we know about biology. You won't be hurt, and you'll be sent back to your planet afterward. You will also be paid. How do you get paid? Rachel asked, showing her practical side even though the situation was impossible. We'll make sure you win your adventure race, Livin said in a tone that he hoped sounded reassuring. We will take you to the finish line and change the timeline so that no one notices you are gone. We can also help you with technology in the future, but only within the limits of our non-interference rules. Elena stepped forward, and you could see that her fear was turning into excitement. What kind of tests? Dr. Marin pulled up holographic displays that showed different environmental chambers. We have made very accurate simulations of extreme environments on your planet and on other planets. We want to see how far humans can adapt to things like heat, cold, pressure, and lack of oxygen. All of this is, of course, within safe limits. Of course, Tom said in a dry voice. Because aliens taking you and testing you in dangerous places is completely safe. You can say no, Zethra said. We won't make you do it. But we think your kind would want to know what you can do. Don't humans want to know what they can do? Don't they want to push their limits and find out what they can do? Marcus looked at the people with him. This is crazy. We should be asking to go back right away. Elena was already shaking her head, though. Are you kidding? This is the chance of a lifetime. We're talking to aliens, Marcus. Aliens who seem to think we're special. I want to know why. Jake said right away, I'm in. This is the best thing that's ever happened to anyone. How can we say no? Rachel and Tom looked at each other for a long time, the kind of wordless communication that comes from being together for a long time. Rachel finally agreed. We'll do it, but only if you agree to our terms. We want to know everything you're testing and how it works. And if any of us wants to stop at any time, you have to stop right away. Zethra felt a rush of something that could have been respect. These people negotiated from a place of respect, even when they were up against beings that were much more advanced in technology. It was very human. Okay, she said. The first test was to see how well they could handle heat. The environmental chamber could make conditions that were anywhere from mild warmth to the temperature of the surface of a star. Dr. Marin had carefully set it to start at 50 degrees Celsius, which is the highest temperature that people usually feel in Earth's deserts. Marcus offered to go first. Someone with military training should be the guinea pig if anyone is going to be one. The chamber was a clear sphere, so the Keltharian scientists could see it from all sides. Marcus walked in wearing only a light shirt and shorts that kept him dry. There were sensor patches all over his skin that kept track of dozens of biological variables. Dr. Marin said, starting test. Starting temperature, 50 degrees Celsius. The heat came on quickly and strongly. The Keltharian observers were fascinated to see Marcus's thermoregulatory system start to work. His skin turned red as blood vessels opened up, bringing warm blood to the surface to give off heat. Sweat started to bead up on his forehead and arms within 30 seconds. Interesting, Kren said softly as he looked over the data streams. His core temperature has only gone up 0.3 degrees, but his surface temperature regulation has turned on several cooling systems at once. This is very impressive. Going up to 55 degrees, Dr. Marin said. Marcus's breathing got deeper and more deliberate. He started sweating a lot more, which made his skin look shiny. The evaporative cooling worked exactly as the Keltharians had seen it work in the field, but seeing it up close with detailed sensor data showed them that it was more complicated than they had thought. Livin said, his heart and blood vessels have changed to send more blood to the skin. His heart rate is higher than normal, but not dangerously so. His blood pressure is stable. He's keeping his core temperature stable without using any technology. They kept raising the temperature by 5 degrees at a time. Marcus was breathing hard and sweating a lot at 60 degrees. But his core temperature had only gone up to 38.2 degrees, which is only a little bit above normal. This would kill one of our people, Zethra said in a low voice. We would still be having a hard time at this temperature, even in an environmental suit. Marcus raised his hand when it got to 65 degrees. Okay, I think that's my limit. I could probably go a little higher, but it wouldn't feel good. Got it, Dr. Marin said, and he quickly turned down the heat. You've exceeded our expectations. A Keltharian would have died from heat stroke at 55 degrees, even with help from technology. Elena got ready for the cold tolerance test as Marcus left the room, happily drinking water. She was sure she could handle low temperatures because she had studied marine biology in Arctic waters. They set the chamber back up, this time for cold. Elena came in wearing a light thermal suit, like the one she would wear to dive in cold water. Dr. Marin said, "We'll start at 0 degrees Celsius. The point where water freezes." Elena stayed calm as the temperature went down. The Caltharian sensors kept an eye on how the body reacted right away. Vasoconstriction cut off blood flow to her extremities, keeping her core heat. Her metabolism sped up, which made her body generate more heat through cellular processes. Tiny muscle contractions that were too small to see started to make heat by moving. It was -5 degrees, Dr. Marin said. Elena's breathing stayed steady and under control. She had trained a lot in cold water, so her body was used to the stress of being cold. The Caltharians were amazed that her core temperature stayed the same even though the temperature outside dropped below freezing. 10 degrees below zero. Elena now showed clear signs of being stressed out by the cold. She shifted her weight and moved a little to warm up her muscles. Her face turned red as blood flow to her skin got even worse. But she was still able to do things, stay alert, and stay in control. 15 degrees below zero. A Caltharian would be in a very bad state of hypothermia at this temperature. Their blood would start to crystallize, and their cells would start to break down. Elena, on the other hand, kept her core temperature and cognitive function even though she was clearly uncomfortable. Her basal metabolic rate has gone up by 40%, Kren said, his voice full of awe. To make heat, she's burning calories at an incredible rate. Her body has turned on brown adipose tissue, which literally turns fat into heat. This is beyond what our biology books say is possible. Elena said she had reached her limit when it was -20 degrees. Any colder and I might get frostbite, she said as she left the chamber and went to a warmer area. But with the right clothes and movement, I could probably stay at that temperature for a few hours. The pressure tests were the most exciting. Tom volunteered because he had experience with high-altitude mountaineering, where pressure differences were always a problem. By raising the pressure in the room, the chamber could make it feel like it was deeper underwater. The test was dangerous, but the Caltharians had done a lot of math to figure out how safe it was. Dr. Marin said, "We'll pretend to go down in water. 10 meters deep, with about 2 atmospheres of pressure." Tom nodded because he had done this a lot while scuba diving. The pressure slowly rose, and his body started to make automatic changes right away. His heart rate went down a little. His breathing got used to the thicker air. 3 atmospheres. 20 meters. At this pressure, a lot of nitrogen starts to dissolve in human blood. If the pressure is released too quickly, this can cause decompression sickness. But Tom's body handled the changes in pressure with ease, thanks to his years of diving experience that had prepared his body for these kinds of stress. 4 atmospheres. 30 meters. The Caltharian watchers leaned in, interested. At this pressure, their own bodies would be getting very squished. The stress would make exoskeletons creak. The crushing force would be hard for the internal organs to fight. Tom looked uncomfortable, but he kept his cool. His chest was compressed and his lung volume was lower, but his body made up for this by making it easier for him to get oxygen from each breath. 5 atmospheres. 40 meters. His heart and blood vessels are amazing, Livin said as he looked over the data. Blood plasma is moving to keep the lungs from collapsing. His spleen has shrunk, releasing more red blood cells to carry more oxygen. These are automatic responses that even the best medical technology has trouble copying. They kept going for 60 meters, which was 9 atmospheres of pressure. Tom was in a lot of pain at this point, but he was still awake and able to do things. A Caltharian would have been crushed down to a small part of their normal size. Tom said, "I think that's enough," his voice strained but clear. "This is the deepest I've ever dived, and the pressure feels different because there isn't any water to support my body." The Caltharians thought about what they had seen as the pressure slowly returned to normal, which kept them from getting decompression sickness. 3 tests, 3 times they showed they could do more than they thought they could. But Rachel's test would have the biggest effect on the observers' minds. "I want to do the low oxygen test," she said. "I've climbed 3 peaks that are more than 8,000 meters high. I want to see what my body can really do in thin air." Instead of increasing pressure, the chamber was set up to mimic high altitude by lowering the amount of oxygen. Dr. Marin began at an altitude of about 3,000 meters, where the amount of oxygen is about 70% of what it is at sea level. Rachel's breathing changed right away. It became deeper and more regular so that she could get the most oxygen from each breath. The Caltharians kept a close eye on how much oxygen was in her blood. 5,000 meters equal. Most people start to feel the effects of hypoxia at this height. Headaches, feeling dizzy, and not being able to think clearly. Rachel's breathing got a little harder, but she stayed awake and able to do things. 7,000 meters. The Caltharian doctors and nurses were getting more and more worried. They would be unconscious or even dead at this level of oxygen. Their bodies just couldn't get enough oxygen from such thin air to keep their brains working. Rachel's face was red and her breathing was hard, but her eyes stayed clear and focused. Her body had turned on every adaptive mechanism it could find. Her bone marrow would be making more red blood cells. Her blood pH was changing to keep the best oxygen binding. Her muscles were changing to use oxygen more effectively. 8,500 meters. This is the same height as the top of Mount Everest. People are really dying in this thin air. At this height, the body can't stay alive forever. Cells start to break down. The brain stops working properly. Rachel was still awake, though. She was breathing heavily but on purpose, and her years of training at high altitudes let her function in what the Caltharians called the death zone. Kren said, his voice shaking a little, her oxygen saturation is at 72%. That should put her in a coma or kill her. But she's awake, responsive, and her brain activity shows only mild impairment. This is medically impossible, as we understand it. After 3 minutes of pretending to be at the top of Mount Everest, Rachel asked for the oxygen level to be raised. She said, I couldn't stay there forever. But I've trained my body to work well even when there's not enough oxygen. It's about knowing your limits and pushing them slowly. The last test was probably the easiest but also the most important. Jake signed up to take the recovery and adaptation test. He would go through a series of stresses, which would test how quickly the human body can recover and adapt. First, he spent 10 minutes in the heat, which was 55 degrees. After that, they had to sit still for 5 minutes before going into 10-degree cold. Then the pressure in the air went up. Then not enough oxygen. The Caltharians thought that each new challenge would add to their stress and make them less able to do their jobs. Instead, they saw something amazing. Jake's recovery from each stress was very quick. During the 5-minute breaks, his vital signs went back to almost normal. And even more surprisingly, his scores on each test after that got a little better instead of worse. His learning, Dr. Marin said in a voice full of awe. His body is recognizing the pattern of stress and recovery and making changes ahead of time. After the heat exposure, his thermoregulatory system responds faster to the cold. After the pressure test, his cardiovascular adjustments for low oxygen are more effective. His adapting in real time. After the last test, all 5 people met with the Caltharian research team. Even though they had been through very stressful tests, they all looked very energized instead of tired. Elena said, so, and her scientific curiosity was fully piqued. Are we special? Is this ability to adapt only human? Dr. Marin was careful with what she said. Every species has changed over time to live in its own environment. But humans have changed over time to live in many environments. You are generalists in a world of specialists, and that makes you special. Marcus, who was always practical, asked the most important question, how does this compare to your people? Zethra thought these people deserved the truth. We would fail every test you just passed. Our biology is very specialized for certain situations, but it is weak outside of them. We need a lot of technology to work in places you think are just hard. You have something we gave up in our quest for perfection, flexibility. Tom laughed, which was strange in such a serious setting. So we're the underdogs in the universe. We're the scrappy survivors who make up for not being good at one thing by being very stubborn. Yes, basically, Zethra said. And that could make you much stronger than you think across the galaxy. Zethra pulled Dr. Marin aside as the humans got ready to go back to Earth. Their memories of the specific encounter were carefully edited to keep cultural contamination from happening. She said softly, we need to change how we think about human potential. These 5 people weren't special by human standards. They were just well trained. Just think about what their species could do if they knew what they were really capable of. Dr. Marin nodded slowly. Or think about what they could do if they learned from us while we learned from them. A partnership between human adaptability and Caltharian technology could be very powerful. Zethra said, if it doesn't destroy both of our civilizations first. They're chaos incarnate. Everything we value about order and control goes against who they are. Dr. Marin said, maybe. Or maybe that's just what our stagnant empire needs, a reminder that chaos isn't always bad. Sometimes it's creative, evolutionary, and alive. Zethra watched the 5 people through the observation window as they laughed and talked about their experiences. They were already getting closer because of the strange thing they had all gone through. They showed no fear or anger, even when they were pushed to their limits. Just excitement and curiosity. Yes, humanity, fuck yeah. The report Zethra sent back to the Keltharian Imperial Council was the most complete study of alien life ever done. More than 500 cycles of observation, hundreds of documented cases of human adaptation, a thorough study of their biological mechanisms, and the outcomes of direct testing. People should have seen it as a great scientific discovery. Instead, it started a political crisis that shook the Empire to its core. Grand Councillor Vexnar stood in front of the gathered council. His old body gave off an air of authority that came from leading for 7 centuries. In the middle of the room, a blue-green sphere that looked like Earth slowly turned. It had become the center of a lot of discussion. Commander Zethra's findings are troubling, Vexnar said, his voice echoing through the large council chamber. Not because they show a hostile species, but because they show how weak we are. We have built our society on the idea that evolution doesn't work well without help. These people show that this is not true. Council member Thren 9, who spoke for the genetic engineering guilds, was barely able to contain his anger. Grand Councillor, we need to look at this in the right way. Yes, people are very good at adapting to their surroundings. But they don't have our advanced technology, our improved genes, or our refined culture. Because they haven't evolved past that basic level, they are biological generalists. Are they primitive? Asked Council member Lineare, who speaks for the exploration fleets. Or did we confuse specialization with being better? Commander Zethra's data shows that our so-called genetic optimization has made us weak. We gave up flexibility for efficiency, and now we're stuck in our perfect environment and can't change when things change. The argument that followed was very heated and revealing. Deep cracks in Keltharian philosophy that had been hidden for thousands of years suddenly came to light and caused a lot of fighting. When Dr. Marin was called to testify before the council, she did so with clinical accuracy. The main question you need to answer is this: has our civilization hit a wall in its evolution? We've changed our genes so much that we can't naturally adapt to new situations anymore. Every problem with the environment needs a technological fix. If our tools ever broke, it would be a disaster because we rely on them so much. Thren 9 said, tools don't fail. We have backup systems, backup protocols, and fail-safes on top of fail-safes. We can trust our technology because we've gotten rid of the messiness of biological variation. Until it isn't, Lineare said in response. What will happen if we come across an environment we weren't ready for? What if we run into a problem that our technology can't fix right away? People would change. They would find a way to stay alive while also coming up with technological fixes. We would just die while we waited for our engineers to find a solution. The main question came up again and again. Were humans a good example to follow or a danger to keep under control? Council member Drenkor, who was speaking for the Military Oversight Committee, said what many people were thinking but few had said. If people can adapt to war and their chaotic minds let them come up with new ways to fight that our more rigid strategic frameworks can't match, then they are a possible military threat no matter how limited their technology is right now. Lineare said, they don't even know we exist yet. We're not sure if we should be afraid of them or learn from them before they give us a reason to do either. Maybe the real question is, what does our fear of how adaptable people are say about how confident we are in our civilization? Grand Councillor Vexnar raised a hand and asked everyone to be quiet. I have read Commander Zethra's full report, which includes her direct contact with human subjects. She thinks that humans have something we really need to understand, the biological and psychological ability to make big changes. Not change within limits, but transformation that changes the way things are done. He turned on a screen that showed models of evolution side by side. Our species reached a certain level of ability and then improved it with technology and genetic engineering. We got really good at being who we are. But we could no longer change into something else. By keeping their biological plasticity, humans can still change. That ability could make them strong allies, Lineare said. Or enemies who are dangerous. When we have to talk to them, how we act will be the most important thing. Thren 9 insisted, if contact should happen at all. There are rules against interfering for a reason. We should keep watching and learning what we can, but we shouldn't touch them directly because that could speed up their growth in ways we can't predict. There were fights in the council chamber, with different groups pushing for different solutions. Some people wanted to be completely cut off from other people because they thought they were too unpredictable and dangerous. Others wanted to make sure that contact was safe and controlled so that they could learn from human biology and help their culture grow. A small but vocal group pushed for full participation, saying that the Keltharian Empire needed the chaos and creativity that humans brought. Zethra, who was still in her ship orbiting Earth, was very angry as she listened to the debate. The council was so focused on what humans meant for the Empire that they missed the bigger picture. She turned on her communication link to the council. With all due respect, Grand Counselor, you're asking the wrong questions. Everyone in the room stopped talking and looked at the holographic projection of the commander. Zethra went on, the question isn't whether humans are a threat or an opportunity for the Empire. What does the fact that humans can adapt mean for how we think about evolution, survival, and progress in the universe? She got some data to compare. We've seen thousands of species on hundreds of worlds. We've recorded how life has changed in places like methane lakes and radiation-soaked wasteland planets. We've also come up with a complete theory of biological development that is based on more specialization and better technology. People completely break that model. They were able to generalize and adapt biologically to get what they wanted. They took over their planet not by making themselves better for certain situations, but by being able to do well in all situations. They use a completely different evolutionary strategy that works just as well as ours. Maybe even more. From her seat in the council chamber, Dr. Marin added her support. Commander Zethra is right. We're not making a political choice, we're in an epistemological crisis. A species that used methods we thought were primitive to get ahead is making us question everything we thought we knew about biological superiority. Grand Counselor Vexnar looked like he was thinking. Are you saying that the philosophy of our whole civilization might be wrong? Zethra said, I'm saying it's not complete. We found one way to succeed, focusing on one thing and improving technology. People found another, the ability to change and the ability to change biologically. Both of them work. But ours has hit its limit, while theirs is still growing. The council felt the weight of the implications settle over them. If Zethra was right, the Keltharian Empire had been working on a method for thousands of years that had ended up limiting them. They had become the best at what they did, masters of their perfect environment, but they couldn't change it all. Council member Lineare said what a lot of people were thinking. So what should we do? We can't just change the way our whole species works to make it more adaptable. You can't undo thousands of years of genetic improvement. We are who we are. Maybe, Zethra said slowly, the answer isn't to change who we are, but to learn from who we aren't. Humans can adapt biologically. We are very good with technology. Both methods have their own problems. Together. She let the suggestion hang in the air. Threnine said no right away. Are you saying that we should integrate? Bringing our civilization together with a species that doesn't even know we exist yet? That's not just new, it's crazy. Is it? Lineare asked. We've brought dozens of species into the Empire through diplomacy. Why not people? Drenkor said, because they are not ready. Politically divided, technologically backward, and culturally disorganized. If we contact them now, they might be scared or act in ways we can't predict. Then we wait, Zethra said. We keep watching. We keep track of how they grow. And when they can travel between stars on their own, we don't treat them like superior beings who are doing them a favor by being there. Instead, we treat them like possible equals who want to work with them. The idea was very new. The Keltharian Empire had never thought of a less advanced species as possible equals. Their whole system of diplomacy was based on relationships of power, with themselves at the top. Grand Counselor Vexnar thought about the idea very carefully. You're asking us to rethink our place in the universe in a big way. To admit that we might not be the most advanced species that has ever existed. I want us to think about the possibility that there isn't a single peak, Zethra said. That different ways of evolving can be equally valid. That people aren't better or worse than us, but different from us in ways that could work well together. Once again, there was a lot of arguing in the council chamber. This time, though, the arguments were more complicated. They weren't so much about whether humans were a threat as they were about how the Empire should change its view of the world to fit this new knowledge. During a break in the debate, Dr. Marin went up to Grand Counselor Vexnar. We haven't talked about one more thing. If we've seen people learn how to adapt, others may have too. There may be other advanced civilizations watching Earth besides us. Vexnar's skin turned a dark shade of worry. You think other species might try to take advantage of human biology? Or get rid of it as a possible threat? Marin said. If we've come to the conclusion that human adaptability could threaten our civilization, others might come to the same conclusion. Some people might think that taking action ahead of time is necessary. The consequences were troubling. Different species may already be watching Earth and judging humans based on their own philosophical and strategic frameworks. Some people might think that humans are dangerous chaos that needs to be stopped or killed before it spreads to other planets. Vexnar brought up this new worry when the council met again. We might not be able to just watch and wait. If other civilizations see humans as a threat, Earth could become a battlefield for different groups with different goals. We need to think about what humanity means to us and what, if anything, we should do to protect them until they can do it themselves. Drenkor, a member of the council, made a very important point. To protect them, we would have to show that we were there. That would start all the problems with contact that we've been trying to avoid. And not protecting them could mean letting a species with never-before-seen adaptive potential die, Lineare said in response. It would be a terrible loss for both people and the galaxy's biodiversity and knowledge of evolution. The argument moved to this new level. The proud and old Keltharian Empire was in a situation it had never been in before. They had found a species that made them question their most basic ideas about how evolution and progress work. They had to make a choice that would shape their civilization's future for thousands of years. Would they see humans as a threat to be kept in check, something to be studied from a distance, or possible partners in a galaxy that is much more complicated and dangerous than most people know? Grand Councillor Vexnar finally called for a preliminary vote. This vote was not on the final policy, but on the basic question that would guide all future decisions. Should the Keltharian Empire protect and eventually work with humans, even though they are currently primitive and chaotic? The vote was close, which showed that the council was very divided. But in the end, the answer was yes, but only by a small amount. One of the oldest civilizations in the galaxy respected humanity because it was chaotic, unpredictable, and could adapt to anything. Not because of their technology or culture, but because of the simple, deep fact that they are biologically superior. The Keltharians now had an even harder question to answer. How do you keep a species safe without stopping them from being able to adapt? How do you lead without taking charge? How do you watch without getting in the way? The Empire had never really had to deal with these kinds of questions before. Questions that would make them change and grow in ways they had been avoiding for thousands of years. The Keltharian Empire was already changing because of people. People didn't even know that aliens were real. Zethra had become Earth's unofficial guardian after 600 cycles of the observation mission. The Imperial Council had given her more power to keep an eye on not only how humans adapt biologically, but also any threats that other species that might have found humanity might pose. Her worries were correct. The discovery happened during a routine scan of Earth's orbital space. There is a small but clear gravitational anomaly that shows a cloaked ship using technology that is different from Keltharian systems. Someone else was looking at Earth. "Commander, we have a confirmed signature," Livin said, his skin flashing with alarm colors. The cloaking technology fits the profiles of the Zoathi collective. Zethra felt a chill of fear wash over her. The Zoathi were a warlike race that wanted to take over other civilizations and saw them as either resources to be used or threats to be eliminated. If they had found people? How long have they been here? Not known. But at least 50 cycles, based on how the orbits are decaying. Just like us, they've been watching. Zethra quickly set up a secure line of communication with the Imperial Council. Within hours, she got permission to do something the Keltharian Empire didn't do very often: actively stop another species observation mission. The fight happened in high orbit, and both ships decloaked at the same time. The Zoathi ship was smaller than the Luminous Accord, but it was heavily armed and had a sharp shape that made it look like it was ready to attack. "This is Commander Zethra from the Keltharian Imperial Fleet. You are looking at a planet that we are protecting. Say what you want." The answer came from Commander Krell, a Zoathi military officer whose reputation for being very efficient was well known throughout the area. His lizard-like features made it look like he was having fun. "Safety? When did the Keltharians start claiming primitive worlds? People all over the galaxy know about your rules against interfering. What is it about these specific primitives that makes them special?" "That's not your concern," Zethra said, even though she knew the question was valid. Krell knew that the Empire was acting out of character. 70 cycles of watching the humans, Krell said in a casual tone, but his eyes were calculating. "An interesting species. Very flexible. Diverse in terms of biology. Once properly trained and genetically improved, they would make great soldiers. The collective is very interested in getting samples." Zethra's skin turned a deep purple color because she was so angry. People are not things that can be used as resources. They are sentient species that needs protection until they can protect themselves. Krell's laugh was mean and mocking. When did the Keltharians start to feel so strongly? You've looked at thousands of species without getting so attached. What do these mean? Zethra had asked herself this question many times before. What was the point of humans? Why did this one species, out of the thousands she had listed, make her feel so strongly? Because they mean something important, she finally said. An evolutionary approach that we thought was bad but turned out to be more complex than we had thought. Their ability to adapt could help all species, not just one. Krell thought about this, but his face was blank. We could argue about this. My ship is smaller, but it has better weapons. Your ship is bigger, but it's better for research. It could go either way in the battle, and it would definitely hurt both of our ships. Or we could come to an agreement, Zethra said, but her tactical systems were already running combat scenarios. Krell said, this is what I understand. People will one day be able to travel between stars. When they do, they will be involved in galactic politics whether we want them to be or not. They will be tough competitors because they can change. The Zoathi collective would rather deal with possible threats before they become real ones. By making them slaves? Zethra asked, and it was clear that she was angry. By leading them, Krell said. People are chaotic, violent, and hard to predict. If they were left to grow on their own, they could make whole areas of space unstable. The collective could give structure, direction, and purpose. You mean to say control? Control is just another word for order, Krell said. Something your people should like. Or have you become so obsessed with the chaos of people that you've forgotten how important stability is? Livin's alert broke up the conversation. Commander, there's another problem. A third ship is coming out of hiding. This ship was not like either the Keltharian or Zoathi designs. It looked like it was made of living things, and it pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that looked like they were talking to each other. This is Harmonizer Velshera of the Symphonic Collective, a voice that sounded like music said. We have been watching this world and your debate. We think both of your points of view are narrow and worrying. The Symphonics were known as philosophers and scientists. They were a type of people who had made progress in technology by combining biology with technology instead of building machines. Their presence in Earth's orbit made an already complicated situation even more so. How many different kinds of animals are looking at Earth? Zethra asked out loud. We found at least 5, Velshera said. Maybe more using observation methods we haven't found yet. Many civilizations have been very interested in humanity, but they have all come to different conclusions about how important it is. Krell's aggressive stance got a little less harsh. Even though we don't all agree on what to do about it, it seems that we all know that people are special. Maybe, Velshera said, we should talk about this as a group instead of fighting about it. I suggest that we hold a conference in Earth's orbit for all the species that have been watching humans. Instead of risking conflict that could hurt the species we're talking about, we should work together. It was a good idea, and within 10 cycles, representatives from 7 different civilizations had met in neutral space near Earth. It was amazing how different the species were, with different evolutionary paths, philosophical frameworks, and technological approaches. But they all had one thing in common: they were all interested in people. The conference took place on a neutral station, where each species gave their opinion on humans and their suggestions for how galactic civilization should react. The Zoathi wanted to integrate humans into their group before they got too advanced in technology to be led. The Symphonics pushed for the exchange of ideas about religion and philosophy. Once people could travel between stars, they thought that the chaos of humans could bring new life to a stagnant galactic culture. The Krell Dominion, a violent race, saw humans as possible military threats and suggested strict containment or elimination. The Harmonious Assembly was a peaceful trading group that thought humans could be future business partners because they could adapt to new situations and open up new markets and opportunities. Each point of view was correct in its own way. Every species was putting its own hopes, fears, and values on people. Zethra heard all the presentations before giving the Keltharian point of view. We suggest something never done before. We wait. We look. We keep things from getting in the way of Earth until people can travel between stars on their own. And only then do we show ourselves and offer to work together as equals. Equals? The Krell person said with a laugh. They're primitive people who still use hydrocarbons to get energy. Yes, today, Zethra said. But if they keep going at this rate, they'll be able to make technologies that took us thousands of years to develop in just a few centuries. They can adapt to more than just biology, they can also adapt to culture, technology, and new ideas. It would be a mistake to not give them enough credit. Velshera of the Symphonics agreed with this plan. Commander Zethra is smart. People should have the right to grow and change naturally and choose where they want to be in the galaxy. We should be protectors, not controllers. But Krell still didn't believe it. What will happen when they make weapons that could destroy our civilizations? What happens when their chaos spreads to other planets? Who is responsible for the effects of letting them grow without any limits? Zethra said, we all do. Every intelligent species is responsible for the community of the galaxy. But that doesn't mean we can stop other species from growing because we're scared. The debate went on for many rounds, showing that there were deep philosophical differences about what intelligence is, what rights developing species have, and what responsibilities advanced civilizations have. On Earth, however, people went about their lives without knowing that 7 alien civilizations were arguing about their future. Elena was diving in the Great Barrier Reef, pushing her free diving limits and marveling at the strange world below the waves. She didn't know that real aliens were talking about whether her kind should have freedom or control. Marcus was getting ready for an ultramarathon across Death Valley. His body was getting used to the extreme heat, but he didn't know that scientists were studying his biological resilience very closely. Rachel and Tom were trying a new climbing route in the Himalayas. Their bodies were getting used to the thin air, but they didn't know that their altitude adaptation had caused a crisis in the understanding of evolutionary biology in an alien civilization. Jake was practicing parkour in a city, learning how to move through complicated three-dimensional spaces with his body. He didn't know that his species' ability to change their bodies had made them the subject of political debate in the galaxy. People were impressive because they didn't know how impressive they were. They pushed limits because that's just who they were, not for fame or recognition. They changed because they had to in order to stay alive, not because they wanted to show cosmic observers something. After a lot of discussion, the conference came to a compromise: the Galactic Accordance on Earth. No species would come into direct contact with humans until they could travel between stars on their own. All observations would be done in a way that didn't get in the way of normal human growth. A protection zone would be set up around the solar system of Earth to stop any species from taking advantage of it or acting aggressively. If humans ever traveled between stars, the first contact would be planned by a group of people, giving humanity a single galactic community instead of separate groups. If any species broke these rules, all of the signatory civilizations would punish them together. It wasn't perfect. The Krell Dominion and a few other species refused to sign. But a lot of big civilizations agreed that Earth got some protection it wouldn't have had otherwise. After the conference, Zethra went back to the Luminous Accord and felt both relieved and worried. They had given people time to grow and change on their own. But that time was short. If things keep going the way they are, humans will be able to fly between stars in 200 to 300 years. And then the galaxy would be on the same level as people. She thought about how the chaotic, adaptable, and tough humans would react if they found out they weren't the only ones in the universe. Would they be happy? Are you scared? Angry? Welcoming? She thought that all of those things were probably happening at the same time. Because people were always saying one thing and doing another. Dr. Marin joined her at the window, and they both watched the Earth slowly spin below. Do you think we did the right thing? Marin asked. I think we made the only choice that honored their right to choose for themselves, Zethra said. We won't know for a few hundred years if it's the right choice. Marin said, the galaxy is about to change. Things will never be the same when humans leave Earth. Their disorder will mess up thousands of years of careful order. Maybe that's just what the galaxy needs, Zethra said. We've been stable for so long that we've forgotten how to change. People might remind us that chaos can be helpful. It can be creative at times. Changing. Alive. Or they could set fire to everything, Marin said. Or that, Zethra said. But it will be up to them. Their future. That's how it should be. On Earth below, people kept changing, living, thriving, pushing their limits, and dreaming of the stars. They didn't know someone was watching them. But one day, they would be able to touch those stars. And the people who watched would become the watched. 247 years after the Galactic Accordance on Earth was signed, people took their first independent step into space. The ship was called Prometheus, and it was the result of generations of human ambition, engineering breakthroughs, and a refusal to accept limits. It wasn't the fastest ship in the galaxy, the most beautiful, or the most advanced. But it worked, and it was made and designed by people. Commander Zethra, who is now one of the Empire's most respected xenologists even though she is very old, was on a modern Keltharian observation ship at the edge of Earth's solar system. There were people from every species that had signed the accordance around her, all watching to see how humans would react when they met the rest of the galaxy for the first time. The current science officer, a young Keltharian named Sephra, said, "They're using a fusion ramjet hybrid system. Rough but useful. In 20 years, they should be in the Alpha Centauri system." 20 years in a ship that was only a little bigger than their homes on their planet, Velshera of the Symphonic said with what sounded like admiration. "We wouldn't think about going on a trip like that without at least some kind of suspended animation or time dilation technology." Zethra said, "People are patient when they need to be. And when they want to be, they're impatient. It's part of how they can change." There were 43 people on the Prometheus, all of whom were volunteers who knew they were going on a one-way trip. Communication lag with Earth would make it impossible to talk in real time. They were really alone, like pioneers going into the unknown. Dr. Sarah Chen was one of them. She was the granddaughter of Elena, a marine biologist who had been tested on the luminous accord but didn't remember it. Sarah's genes and spirit were both adaptable like her grandmother's. The Prometheus communications officer said, "Approaching system boundary. We are officially leaving the solar system. We are in space." The crew on the ship broke out in celebration. As people who had already spent 3 years in space celebrated the moment they had all worked toward, champagne bubbles floated in microgravity. They were the first people to leave the solar system on their own, leading the way for humanity to expand into the galaxy. They didn't know that people from dozens of alien civilizations were watching them. The Galactic Accordance said that humans would have to be able to travel between stars on their own before they could make first contact. The next question was when and how to tell people that they weren't alone. The Zoathi observer, who was more diplomatic than Krell, said, "We should wait until they get to Alpha Centauri. Let them fully enjoy their success before we make their worldview more complicated." "They are people," Zethra said with the confidence that comes from years of watching. "They'll deal with the shock better than you think. Remember to be flexible." There was a lot of talk before the decision was made. They would wait one more cycle, giving the Prometheus time to get farther away from Earth's system, far enough that the crew was committed to their journey and couldn't easily turn back. People on Earth had no idea what was about to happen. They were focused on the usual problems of human civilization, like political fights and environmental issues. They were proud of the fact that the Prometheus had launched, but most people were more worried about their own lives at the time. The alien observers thought that was very human. They could be making history by traveling between stars and arguing about local politics at the same time. Their brains worked on more than one level at a time, which is another way they were adaptable. The day that was picked for the first contact was well thought out. The Prometheus was 38 days outside the solar system, still pretty close to home but mentally committed to their journey. Captain Marcus Chen, the grandson of Marcus, who had once been tested on the luminous accord, was looking over navigation data when the communications officer yelled, "Captain, we're getting a message. Source unknown. It's not from Earth." There was no sound on the bridge. Everyone on the crew knew right away what this could mean. The communications officer sent the audio to the main speakers with shaking hands. "Hello, Prometheus. I am Harmonizer Velshera of the Symphonic Collective, and I am speaking for the galactic community. Welcome to the bigger galaxy. You are not alone." The bridge was completely quiet for exactly 5 seconds. Then things went crazy. A very human response to news that changes everything. Questions, exclamations, disbelief, excitement, and fear all mixed together. Captain Chen, using the same flexibility his grandfather had shown, raised his hand to ask for silence. "Listen up, crew. Take a deep breath, everyone. This is what people have been dreaming about for hundreds of years. Don't panic, it will make us look bad." His calm authority helped the crew stay focused. They were able to talk to each other in both directions in just a few minutes, but the light lag made for awkward pauses. "This is Captain Marcus Chen from the Earth ship Prometheus. We are very surprised to hear from you. And I'm very happy. How long have you been aware of us?" "About 250 years on Earth," Velshera said. "Many kinds of life have been watching your planet with great interest. You are a very special species, and we have been waiting for you to be able to travel between stars before we talk to you." The crew took this information in. Observation for 250 years. People had been watched, studied, and judged without knowing it. Why wait until now? Dr. Sarah Chen asked, her grandmother's scientific curiosity winning out over her shock. Because you had the right to grow up naturally and make your own decisions about your future. It's called the Galactic Accordance on Earth, and it's an agreement between many civilizations to protect your growth while you were weak. Alien representatives watched closely as humans reacted on observation ships all over the area. What would they do if they found out they had been watched for so long? Would they feel like they had been wronged? Thankful? Are you mad? As expected, the answer was complicated and had many parts. Protected from what? Captain Chen asked, and his military instincts immediately picked up on the threat. From those who might want to take advantage of your species or get in the way of your growth, Velshera said. People all over the galaxy are very interested in how adaptable your biology is. Not everything is good. Velshera gave a carefully planned introduction to galactic civilization over the next few hours. There are thousands of species in many galaxies. Different kinds of people, technology, and ways of life. A complicated network of alliances, fights, and cooperation that had been going on for millions of years. And the new people, who were humans, had already made an impression just by being themselves. What's so special about us? Dr. Chen asked. What made us so interesting? Your ability to change, Velshera said. Most species change over time to become specialists that are perfectly suited to certain environments. You stayed generalists, which means you could work in almost any setting. This is very rare and valuable. Back on Earth, where the conversation was being sent with an unavoidable time delay, people reacted in a range of ways, from excitement to fear to an existential crisis. Some people thought that first contact was the best thing that ever happened to humanity. Some people were worried about what it meant for people's freedom and independence. Religious leaders talked about what the theological effects would be. Scientists were happy that they were learning more. Politicians fought over what to do. Military leaders were worried about how to protect against possible alien threats. In short, it was a completely chaotic human reaction to a big event. The alien observers thought this was both annoying and kind of cute. They can't even agree on how they feel about us, said the Zoathi observer. Yes, Zethra said. But they'll figure it out. By arguing, debating, competing, and finally coming to a messy compromise that probably won't make everyone happy but will be good enough to move forward. That's how people work. Captain Chen asked the question that would shape how humans interact with the galactic community while on board the Prometheus. What happens now? What part do we play in this galactic civilization? That, Velshera said, is completely up to you. You are a free species with the right to choose your own path. The galactic community offers trade, partnership, cultural exchange, and protection for all. But you can go your own way and talk to people as much or as little as you want. What do you want from us? Dr. Chen asked, and because of her scientific training, she looked for deeper reasons. Really? Velshera said. We want to learn from you. Your ability to adapt is something that many of us have lost in our quest for perfection or specialization. We want to understand how you maintain such biological and cultural flexibility. And we hope you might help us remember how to change, how to grow, how to face chaos and turn it into opportunity. Velshera may have said the most honest thing possible. The galactic community didn't want to conquer or exploit humanity. They wanted something far more profound, to be reminded of qualities they had lost in their ancient, refined civilizations. Captain Chen looked at his crew and saw the same mix of excitement, fear, and determination that he felt. They were pioneers, the first humans to speak with alien intelligence, and their decisions now would shape humanity's relationship with the galaxy for generations to come. Give us time, he said finally. This is too much. We need to process this, consult with Earth, decide collectively how humanity wants to proceed. Can we have some time before making any commitments? Of course, Velshera replied. We've been waiting for 2.5 centuries. We can wait a little longer. But you should know that you are welcome in the galactic community. Not as subordinates or primitives, but as equals. People respect and value your ability to adapt, bounce back, and not accept limits. As the Prometheus crew began the long process of absorbing this new reality, Zethra watched from her observation vessel with mixed emotions. She had spent most of her life studying humanity, watching them evolve from primitive observers to interstellar travelers. She had defended them, fought for them, and now they were taking their place on the galactic stage. What do you think they'll choose? Asked Zethra. Isolate or engage? Engagement, Zethra said with certainty. Humans are curious, social creatures. They'll want to learn, interact, and explore. But they'll do it in their own messy way and on their own terms. Things are about to get a lot more interesting in the galaxy. Or less stable, the Zoathi observer said. Maybe both, Zethra said. But stability has kept us from moving forward. We might need some human chaos to mix things up. As news of first contact spread around the world, people went crazy, as they always do. Parties and protests. Conferences for scientists and revivals for religious people. Plans for huge space growth and calls for careful separation. Discussions about what it means to be human in a galaxy full of other life. It was a beautiful mess, the kind of lively, unpredictable energy that made people so interesting to watch. And now, at last, people would take that chaos to the stars. The galaxy would never be the same again. 50 years after the first meeting, the Luminous Accord, which is now a museum ship that honors the cooperation between Keltharians and humans, held a historic conference. People from Earth and 47 other alien civilizations came together to look back on the first 50 years of humanity's integration into galactic society. Commander Zethra, who was now very old even by Keltharian standards, had been asked to be the guest of honor. She stood on the observation deck, where she had spent so many cycles watching Earth. Now, though, human ships moved freely among the alien ships, something she had only imagined before. Dr. Sarah Chen, who is now Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council, came to the window with her. Sarah was only 73 years old, which is young by diplomatic standards, but she had earned respect for being both very scientific and very practical. Commander Zethra, Sarah said with a smile, my grandmother told me to thank you if I ever saw you. She never remembered being on this ship, but she always felt like someone was watching over her and leading her to the stars. Zethra's skin changed to a warm amber color, which is a Keltharian way of showing happiness. Your grandmother was one of a kind. You too. It looks like all people are like this when they have the chance. They stood together and watched the busy traffic in space. It was easy to tell which ships were human because they were designed to be both efficient and beautiful in a way that was very human. They weren't the fastest or most advanced ships, but they worked and spread to dozens of star systems in just 50 years. Don't you think we're loud? Sarah said with a smile that showed she knew what she was doing. All the aliens I've met have said that humans are messy and spread out. Yes, you are, Zethra said. But that's not a bad thing. The galaxy has been too quiet for too long. Safe. Stable. Stagnant. Humanity brought life back to galactic civilization. There were many examples of how people have affected galactic society in the conference hall. People's ability to adapt had led to new ways of colonizing planets that were once thought to be too far away for most species to live on. The creative chaos of humans had brought art and culture back to life in species whose artistic expressions had become so refined that they were sterile. People's natural curiosity about science had opened up areas of research that were thought to be done. But the most important effect had been on philosophy. Dr. Marin, the Empire's most respected xenologist and now over 1,000 years old, gave the main speech. Her body was old and slow, but her mind was as sharp as ever. 50 years ago, she said, humans joined the galactic community. We thought we were welcoming a new species into our well-ordered society. Instead, people reminded us of something we had forgotten. Evolution never stops. Growth never stops. The moment you say something is perfect is the moment you start to die. She showed data that compared how different species had changed since they first came into contact with people. The Keltharians had started to bring genetic diversity back into their population, undoing thousands of years of progress. The Symphonics had started to like more chaotic forms of art. The Zoathi were even starting to doubt their strict military hierarchy. Humans didn't change us by force or persuasion, Marin said next. They changed us by showing us how. By showing us that being adaptable, flexible, and willing to accept chaos can be strengths instead of weaknesses. They reminded us that the universe rewards people who can change, not people who are already perfect. The presentation showed video from all over space where people live. People living on ice worlds and desert planets, getting used to high gravity and low pressure, and doing well in conditions that would need a lot of technology for most species. But even more impressive, the video showed people working with aliens, learning from them, teaching them, and coming up with new ways of doing things that combine human flexibility with alien technological advancement. The results were often messy but very useful. A colony of Keltharians and humans on a world that would have been too small for either species to live on alone, but worked well together. A movement in the arts that combined structured and spontaneous expressions by humans and symphonic music. A military academy for Zoathi and humans that taught tactics that combined strategic discipline with the ability to adapt and improvise. Humans weren't taking over or replacing other species. They were mixing with them to make something new that was better than the parts that made it up. Next, Ambassador Chen spoke for the people who lived through these 50 years. Humanity faced a choice when we found out we weren't alone in the universe, she said. We could run away in fear, shut ourselves off from others, or we could do what people have always done, adapt, explore, and face the challenge head-on. She grinned. Of course, we chose chaos. We fought for years over the best way to go about things, couldn't agree on a single policy, and then we all just started going in a lot of different directions at once, with each colony doing things a little bit differently and each group trying its own way. The alien representatives made sounds that showed they understood. This was very human. And you know what? That messy, disorganized, and chaotic way of doing things worked. We found what worked best in each situation by trying a lot of different things. We could change from biology to culture to social organization. We didn't have one right answer, we had hundreds of good answers that we changed depending on the situation. She showed information about human colonies. Each one was different, changing to fit the needs of the area, the aliens living there, and the problems they faced. There was no one way that people colonized because people didn't believe in templates. They believed in trying new things, changing things, and being willing to fail and try again. Chen pointed to the aliens who were there and said, "We've learned so much from you. Keltharian technological sophistication, symphonic philosophical depth, Zoathi strategic thinking. But we've also given something back, the reminder that chaos can be creative, that being good enough in many situations is often better than being perfect in one, and that perfection is the enemy of progress." The presentation got to its most important point, not just mixing technology or culture, but also evolutionary philosophy. Young Keltharians were choosing to keep more genetic diversity, putting adaptability ahead of optimization. Some symphonic communities were purposefully adding chaos to their very ordered societies. The Zoathi military had even started teaching their officers adaptive strategy instead of just rigid tactical doctrine. Chen said, "People have been called the galaxy's chaos agents." And that's true. But chaos isn't just about breaking things. It's being creative. It's the ability to change. It's evolution happening right now. You let us into your well-ordered galactic civilization, and we won't mess it up. We're making it changeable, flexible, and alive. The conference went on for days, and dozens of species gave talks about how humans had changed their civilizations. Some effects were small, while others were huge, but the pattern was always the same. Other species were inspired to rethink their own evolutionary and social paths by how adaptable humans are biologically and culturally. Zethra was asked to give closing remarks on the last day. She walked slowly to the podium, feeling the weight of her many centuries but also the joy of having seen something amazing. "When I first saw Earth, more than 300 years ago," she said, "I saw a species that scared and confused me. They shouldn't have been able to live through the extremes they went through. Their biology didn't fit with what we thought it would. I thought that successful civilizations were based on order, but their chaos went against everything I thought." She stopped and looked out at the representatives of many species, including humans. "I shouldn't have been scared. I should have been happy." People were important to the galaxy because they reminded it that evolution never stops, that there is always room to grow, and that being flexible is more important than being perfect. She turned on a screen that showed Earth as it is now, with orbital installations and regular traffic to and from the surface. It was no longer the lonely, simple world she had seen before. It was a center of activity in the galaxy, where many different species came to trade, learn, and feel the chaotic energy that was unique to humans. Zethra went on, "The galaxy wanted to know what humanity's unexpected strength was. We thought it was their ability to adapt biologically. Their ability to live in very harsh conditions. Their amazing ability to bounce back. But I've learned that their real strength goes beyond biology. They won't accept that anything is impossible. Their willingness to fail, learn from it, and try again. They believe that limits are only there to be pushed and broken. Their ability to face the unknown with interest instead of fear." She looked right at Ambassador Chen. People don't just change to fit in with their surroundings. They change their surroundings to fit them. They don't just get through hard times. They turn problems into chances. They don't just take the world as it is. They picture how it could be and then work to make that picture come true. The room was quiet, listening to what she had to say. "So what does this mean for the galaxy?" "It means that a new era is beginning. A time when people are questioning what they thought they knew, when stability is being replaced by dynamic growth, and when order is being balanced with creative chaos. And it's both scary and exciting at the same time." She smiled, and the wrinkles on her face showed that she was really happy. "When I first learned about humans, I was worried that they might be a danger to galactic civilization. Now I get it, they're not a danger to society. They're the next step in the evolution of civilization. And we are lucky to see it, be a part of it, and grow with them. Humanity, fuck yeah, she said at the end, using the phrase that had become an unofficial motto for humans and aliens working together. The humans laughed, and the aliens who had learned to appreciate the crude but true sentiment made sounds of understanding. As the conference came to a close and people started to leave, Zethra stayed at the observation window one last time. Sarah Chen came with her and brought 2 drinks, one for Keltharian biology and one for humans. To the future, Sarah said as she raised her glass. To adaptation, Zethra said, clinking her glass with Sarah's in the human way of toasting. They stood together, watching the ships come and go. They were from many different species that had learned to work together because of their differences, not in spite of them. The galaxy learned from humans that diversity wasn't just okay, it was necessary. That chaos was not only destructive, it was also creative. That being willing to change was more important than being perfect. Have you ever thought about what would have happened if we hadn't talked? Sarah asked. What if you thought people were too dangerous, too chaotic, and suggested isolation or death? Zethra thought about the question very carefully. I think about it a lot. And I'm glad we decided to have faith in human potential instead of being afraid of it. Because being alone would have been a tragedy. Not just for people, but for all of us. You gave us something we didn't even know we needed, hope for the future. And you gave us the stars, Sarah said. And partners to go on adventures with. Zethra felt a deep sense of peace as the last light of the sun on Earth bounced off the museum ship's hull. She had spent her whole life trying to understand people, and in doing so, she had helped both species understand themselves better. People weren't perfect. They were still all over the place, often contradictory, and sometimes annoyingly unpredictable. But they were also creative, strong, able to change with the times, and hopeful about the future. The galaxy was old and tired, but humans were a breath of fresh air. A reminder that evolution goes on, that growth never stops, and that the most important trait for survival is the ability to change and adapt. The Keltharian Empire and many other civilizations were amazed by how adaptable humans are. They were amazed to see how well humans did in impossible situations, how they refused to accept limits, how they pushed boundaries, and how they questioned what they thought they knew. The real lesson, though, wasn't how to stay alive in extreme heat, cold, or pressure. It was about the human spirit, that unexplainable quality that turned problems into chances, that saw every failure as a chance to learn, and that faced the huge, scary universe with curiosity and determination instead of fear. Humans had shown that being able to adapt wasn't just about biology. It was about how people thought, how they lived, and the deep-seated belief that people could get through anything if they didn't give up. And that belief, which spread and changed people, was changing the galaxy one species, one world, and one challenge at a time. The aliens who were watching were amazed at how well humans adapted to harsh conditions. But they had changed because people wouldn't accept that those places had to stay extreme, that problems had to stay impossible to solve, and that the future had to look like the past. In the end, the biggest change for people wasn't to heat, cold, or pressure. It was to the infinite and always changing nature of life itself. That made all the difference.